again. Uh, Christos here, with another tale from Northwood Court. When we moved to Northwood Court, I was starting in a new school. When we moved to Bridge Street, I was going to a school called Fisher Mitchell, which was in the south side of Bath. And moving to Northwood Court meant that I moved schools to Dyke Newell School, which was kind of in the central northish part of Bath. Like it was another new school. I had been to. This was my third new school in 3 years. Or I guess maybe fourth if you count kindergarten in Portland, maybe. Anyway, it was a new school. I didn't really know anybody. I had one friend named Gerald. I think I mentioned earlier, who lived in that little section of Northwood Court that we lived in. I didn't really know anybody other than that. So it was kind of slow meeting friends. There were other kids around, but they were quite a bit older. There really weren't any other kids my age at that time. So I had my friend Gerald, and he and I hung out quite a lot. And I don't think that year I really made any other friends. Except maybe a guy named Josh Brewer, who I remained friends with for quite a few years. I think until 7th or 8th grade. I mean, I could say it turned out that he was a fucking weirdo. But I was a fucking weirdo, so we were just, he and I were two different kinds of weirdos. But at some point during that 3rd grade year, I made friends with him, and he literally lived on the good side of the tracks, because where the housing project was, there were railroad tracks, and that were raised kind of above the housing, and on the other side of those railroad tracks were, I mean, they were fancy by our standards, but they weren't really, they were split level ranches and shit. So, while to me they seemed fancy, that they really, it wasn't all that. But I guess in those, in those early Reagan years, it really seems like not only having a house, but having a house with a garage was so fucking fancy. To me. But, and I say all that to say that Josh's parents did not like him hanging out with me, because I don't think it for any actual defect in my personality, but because I lived in Northwood Court, and because I kind of dressed shitty. My parents were poor, so we went school shopping at Goodwill. That's just the way it was. And that, and it was fine. And I don't really remember. I don't remember letting it bother me too much. But even at third grade, we would walk home, and there were there were the housing project in this area where he lived were literally separated by the railroad tracks. But the way the school that we went to was nearby, but it was on the other side of a marsh, a swamp. And there was a dirt and mud covered footpath that cut through the swamp to get to the school. And that's how we walked to school every day. But Josh was not allowed to, he wasn't allowed to cross the railroad tracks and walk through that way to the school with us. He was only allowed to walk his way to school, which was on the other side of the tracks. There was a baseball field, so he was allowed to walk by the path through the baseball field and then go to the school that way. But he wasn't allowed to come to the to the poor people's way. And as I got older, that just kind of, I just found it. I guess I found it more funny than anything else, I guess. Just because it was so blatant, it was so a special episode of Good Times, it was the villain in an episode of What's Happening or something, where they're just slightly higher class, but just a joke, just an absolute fucking joke. So anyway, So I became good friends with Josh that year, and unfortunately, I think that my friend Gerald only lasted like maybe half the year, which, you know, unfortunately I didn't keep in touch with him. But I mean, it was probably better. I mean, I don't want to say better, but he was black, and I think that, like, I'm pretty sure that he was like the first time that I saw like racism. Like one of the guys in like Northwood Court getting into a fight with his father because he called Gerald the N-word, like hard R. And Gerald's father tried to kick the guy's ass. But I mean, that's the kind of neighborhood it was, really. But anyway, like I didn't really like that was my first experience with racism, and I mean, it wasn't nice. Gerald didn't get treated well, but you know, I didn't really get treated well either, so you know, it didn't bother me. But I mean, I'm sure he got treated a lot worse at that school, especially like by not just the kids, but by the staff as well. So by the time he left, when his family got you know, redeployed somewhere on however that works. So that I went from, you know, having two friends to back down to only having one at the time. And I think that like throughout by the end of third grade, I ended up having, you know, one or two other friends. There were also kind of weirdos, like a guy named Joey Armstrong, who was just really, really weird, but like a really like funny, goofy kind of guy. And then Angelo, who was also a funny, goofy kind of guy. Although Angelo he was one of those guys who was really good at sports, so everybody liked him. He was like friends with like everybody. But you know, outside of that, like I was friends with those guys like in school at like recess or whatever. But like really outside of school, Josh was the only other kid that I was friends with once Gerald moved away. At least for that, you know, for that year, for that third grade year. there's a lot. There's a lot of like, I guess it's like Bath was a small town, and there was definitely there's definitely a lot of kids who had known each other at least since kindergarten. Some of them, before, because they were family friends. So that was like another reason for being for being kind of a outsider. But being an outsider kind of, I learned how to live with that pretty easily. So it wasn't really a big deal. And by the time that third grade ended and that summer started, I started growing up quite a bit. And I mean that seems like a lot to say, but like I feel like by the time that summer after third grade, I kind of had a better idea of who I was, and it was really one of the first times that I have been able to be a bit more independent, I guess, because we lived in an area I was just sharing a room with my brother, as opposed to sharing a house with fucking 5 other people. So there was a lot of autonomy, and I was allowed to spend a lot more time, by myself outside, because there wasn't anywhere for us to go. So, I had, I was allowed to go outside, and as long as I stayed within a certain parameter, that I could do what I want. My mom wouldn't really care so much. By the time third grade ended, I was kind of coming into my own, and felt at least I had a friend in Josh, and I was feeling a little bit more comfortable in school towards the end of the year. And then shit got a little bit, my fourth grade year was a little bit more nuttier, and I think maybe I'll talk about fourth and fifth grade, maybe fourth, fifth, the rest of my elementary year maybe in another video. Because the fourth grade was when Tim married my mother. And that was a big thing. So I'll pick up on that in my next video. Jasmine, Jack, Silas, I love you guys. And for anyone else that's watching, yeah, thanks for, I guess, watching, and see ya.